This episode is brought to you by Athletic Speed and Movement. At athleticspeedmovement.com, we've taken Del Basquet's 45 years of speed and movement training and put it all in one place just for you. You can get the same training that NFL players have been getting for years, collegiate players have been getting for years, and now high schools across the nation are paying thousands of dollars to bring Del in to install his system, but we've got it online for you. It's time to help your team become faster, not just in the 40, not just their sprint speed, but between the tackles and their cuts while they're chasing down the quarterback. It's time for you to help them become faster everywhere. Jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. There's an orange button there. Just click it. It says, get the keys to playing faster. You'll get the 3 core movement video from Dell. He's explaining the science behind it, all for just the price of your email. Check it out, athleticspeedmovement.com. Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions, with your co-host, Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. What's up, coaches? This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I am Daniel Chamberlain. Coach, I'm here with Coach Kenny Simpson. Nearly avoided a tornado last night. Hopefully, I know we don't do a lot of weather reports anymore, but it gets a little sticky. Town of Sulphur is right down where I grew up in Lone Grove, and it is completely leveled. The story on the street is they had a tornado. First responders showed up to help get people out of buildings, and a second tornado hit while they were doing that. So to the people of Sulphur, I know it's a week too late, and but man, our condolences, and you know, we'll be praying for you. That's tough, and it's so close to my hometown, which got hit 10 years ago or whatever. So it's just Tornado Alley. You never know where it's going to go. It missed us about 8 miles last night, so it could have almost even been the same storm the way that thing moved through there.
Yeah, it's tough thing. Right down the road from us, the team we played in conference, their whole school was gone. Last year during the spring, actually ripped up their turf, and so it's those things are always tough, and you never know. You never know when it's going to be your turn. So
that's right.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get through this spring season and kind of avoid most of it. I've always kind of felt like as soon as football season's coming up, we're going to have some crazy weather. It's going to be super hot or rainy or super cold. I mean, just kind of one of those sports, I guess, where that sport that, and I guess baseball is too, because they kind of play through it too, where you play in the cold, the heat, the wet.
Yeah.
And I would even do a whole episode probably on how you got to be prepared for that kind of stuff. It's always, I think football is impacted more by the weather than almost any other sport. Baseball could probably make an argument, but a lot of times they're probably going to call off a baseball game at some point. In football, they just say you can get hypothermia in Kansas City, or you can play through a sleeting rain, but they're going to keep playing. And so I think it's definitely one of those things that we probably don't think about enough as coaches until we get to that moment.
For sure. Talking weird situations, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about special teams, which I guess aren't weird situations by any means, but they are big time coaching decisions. And so, we're going to talk a little bit of practice tonight. Not so much, I'm sure it'll come through just because that's how it happens, but not so much when you should go for it and shouldn't and use these special teams, but just how to get them in, get them practiced, and how to organize them. So, that's kind of how our questions are going. But yeah, definitely some situations you can have there with the special teams as well. Coming from the Joe Daniels schoolhouse, the dojo, he's a big time go for two, onside every time, like super cool, and so he even saves, like we're going to talk practice time, but you can just save a lot of it just by not doing it, right? Like if you don't ever sky kick or kick deep, cool. If you don't ever field goal, it's good. You don't have to worry about those. So
yeah,
that sounds interesting.
Sounds really good. Sounds really good till you lose a game by 1 because you can't kick a field goal. But
who's the coach? Is it? He's from Arkansas, I think.
Yeah,
won a whole bunch of games.
Punts. Yeah, Kevin Kelly. Yeah,
Kevin Kelly.
So this he actually he has punted, in extreme circumstances. So clearly they have worked on it, but he's known for that. And Special teams is definitely a hot topic. I'm excited about tonight. I'll try to be practical. You know, 'cause some guys that are listening to this, you might not even have a kicker. You know, and so you got to kind of figure out what works for you, and you know, but we'll try to make it as practical as we can.
Absolutely. Before we get started, Coach, why don't you tell us how to simplify football for ourselves, our staffs, and our players? What's up, coaches? I want to talk to you for just a few moments about your program. You know, the longer I'm in this profession, the more I understand that efficiency is truly the name of the game. We're talking offense, defense, doesn't matter, right? Eventually, you're going to come down to checking out your efficiency. So I have to ask you, are you doing everything in your program the most efficient way, right? Are you fundraising the most efficient way? Are you representing your players and your program to the public in the best way? Are you planning to build the facilities the most efficient way? If you answered no to any of those, or really even if you answered yes to all of them, and you haven't contacted Mark Bridges at Ace Sports, you're missing a key step. So look, Mark and his team, you know, they are the go-to group for video board and scoreboard installations for your school. They're not just football either. Mark can help you mock up your newest video board for your that new stadium, or maybe even your old stadium, right? That's where Mark and the guys come in. And we're not just buying a flashy thing, right? Yes, it's nice. It's pretty neat to have that big scoreboard, that big video board, but you're also, you know, you're investing back into that program. You're investing into that newest fundraiser. Sure, you can keep selling your discount cards, your beef jerky, hosting pie auctions, whatever it is that you like to do. But let's just be honest with ourselves, guys. We're not making enough money for those big ticket items. For the big ticket items like turf, an indoor facility, that's where you need a big ticket item fundraiser. That's what Ace Sports is offering you today. Guys, I've talked to Mark several times now, right? And it always comes down to big school, small school. Right? Well, of course, the big schools can afford that new video board, but the small schools really can't. It's just not true anymore, man. Your school isn't too small, and I promise. Okay, 1A, 2A schools, it doesn't matter. Mark and the guys, they're helping them out. Contact Mark today at mark.bridges@acesports.com and let him come give you a quote. Let him show you and your administration the plan. Now, really, it's the cheat code, right? Let him show you the cheat code that is fundraising with Ace Sports video boards. Tell him Daniel sent you.
Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com for all your coaching needs, with over 30 coaching materials, books, as well as 50 PowerPoints and videos and smaller materials, and the free magazine headsets. Findaway Productions also sponsors offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things offense, and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things defense.
Awesome. As always, guys, you know, we will just highly recommend you reach out to anybody in those ads. We don't have them on the podcast unless there's somebody we trust. We know their product's good. You know, as a guy that was trying to be a head coach, it's really difficult to know where good resources are, right? It's you talk about film. You know, we've got the Sky Coach is somebody you use, right? And I'm hoping that someday they'll be a sponsor for us, because I want other people to know about them, which I think they're pretty big brand name now. But if you don't know about them, what do you do as a new coach, right? Talking about jerseys and helmets, and so it's nice to have guys like Zach that, you know, they do sell headsets, so you don't have to be completely blind to where to go out and get these resources at. Coach, I think you have a new book out, right?
I do. We just released the newest in the formation book family. So we put out 90 power spread formations. So that's the third of the book. So I did 98 shotgun wing tee formations, then we did 90 unbalanced. And then this one is more, it has some unbalanced in it. And of course, it's going to have some tight end wing. But most of the book is more spread type looks, where more like 20 personnel, just different ways to use those formations and mix them and match them and create advantages. So it's 90 different formations, and then under each formation, it talks about advantages of the formation, things that you might look at doing with the formation, and the way that we would word it to get into that formation. So hopefully something somebody could use whether they run my offense or not.
That's completely, I don't even know the word. It's been a very long day of driving through storms. So, but people don't think about that enough. Like, yes, we can go out and put in a ton of formations, and I can have verbiage to make my kids do all this cool stuff, and it's hard for a defense to line up. That's great. But what are you using it for, right? What is that formation specifically good for? The main play and the counter to that main play, right? So I think that's wonderful how you do those books. I have the first one hard copy and one digital, I think, somewhere. And I think that's a wonderful way to do that. Like, yes, here's tight end wing, but what is it really good for? Because I need to know why I'm aligning. And we talk about giving kids the why all the time. That's a huge one. You want to start developing your quarterback or your team, give them some football IQ, but your OC doesn't know why they're using certain formations. That's kind of counterintuitive. So that's an excellent way to do that book. And then Coach's Cap still going strong, I believe.
It is. It is now that spring football's coming up, summer's coming up, so it's over at Coach's Cap, CoachsCap, coachescap.com. Funny story on that. My wife wanted me to call it the Coach's Hat, but when you plug that into an address, it would be Coach Shat, and I didn't think that would go over very well. So we went with coachescap.com. But anyway, we've been selling those hats again. Whether you get one of mine or get whatever, just take care of your skin, because we are going to get into that time of year where, it's not, it used to be, well, I'm sunburn and all that stinks. And, now there's a lot more repercussions to that kind of stuff. So make sure you and your players are taking care of your skin.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Let's jump into these questions here, Coach. Number one, we're going to talk about how do you organize your special teams?
Well, I think you got to kind of figure out, I'll come up from a head coaching perspective, and then we'll come at it from like a special teams coordinator. My first actual high school varsity job, I was a defensive line coach, and then probably like goes along in almost every high school staff of America. A week before the season, the guy said, by the way, you're going to coordinate the special teams, probably because no one else wanted it. And he knew I was organized, I would take it serious. So a lot of guys that are running special teams, it's not like they had a big background. A lot of times it just kind of gets dumped on you. So, as a head coach, you have to kind of figure out what's your philosophy on that with your coaches. There's a lot of ways you can do it. You can give it to one guy who carries the main burden, which is probably the most typical way you'll see it done. Or you can spread the love, where you might say, hey, our offensive line coach, you're in charge of extra point field goal. Our defensive coordinator, he's in charge of kickoff. Our offensive coordinator in charge of kickoff return. And you can spread it among your coaches, where each coach kind of has their own team. And they're going to answer to another coach. Or you can do some kind of hybrid. We do kind of a hybrid. I have one coach who's responsible for it, but each coach on my staff will help him with one of his teams. So our defensive coordinator might help him with our kickoff team. Our linebacker coach helps him with our punt team. He's responsible, but he's got a helper. So you got to think about how you're going to do that with your coaches. Then you have to think about what is your rationale or theory on who plays on special teams. So, a lot of guys have different mindsets there. Are you trying to develop players that don't start? Are you trying to make sure all your best guys are out there because you don't want to lose a game on special teams? There's kind of a lot of ideas going around there. And so we operate kind of on a hybrid of that as well. Any kid that goes both ways for us, we usually will take off of special teams unless they're performing like a specialty, like a snapper, punter, kicker, returner. If they're not one of those guys and they play both ways a little bit for us, we're probably going to remove them from the list. Then we're going to go down and look at, okay, who are our non-starters that are qualified and capable of playing? And that can change year to year. That might be one year you get 4. That's not a good year usually.
Right.
One year you might have 15, on the different teams. So you got to kind of go through who's ready, who's not starting. We want them to be, we're going to push them to the front of the line. And then we'll go to our one-way starters. That's kind of how we would organize it. But as a coach, you have to figure out how you're going to organize it. And I don't think every special team is created equal. You can probably hide guys on certain special teams. Like you can probably put a big kid out there on an extra point field goal. He doesn't have to be real fast as long as he's willing to get run over. As long as he's willing to do his job. A guy that can't play on the line for you because maybe he's just not fast enough, he might be able to play on that one. So there you go. Or you might take a guy who is a good athlete, not ready to start for you, and put him on the backside of your kickoff return team. Where, hey, if it comes to him, he will field it, but he's not quite a starter for us, but he's willing to block. He is capable of catching a ball that might come his way. We can put him out there. Depending on what you're doing on the kicking game, you might even be able to put him on the backside of your kickoff, like if you're going to do a directional kick. So there are ways you can get guys out there and maybe hide them. And then I think there are special teams that are more important than others. Like I don't think you can hide a guy on a punt team. When you put him out there on the punt team, you better have 11 guys that are pretty qualified of what they're doing. Kickoff team, unless you're able to directional kick, you don't really want to hide a lot of guys on that either, because we would do things like not block two guys because they're not going to make a tackle. So you can't hide guys on that. So you have to kind of decide what's most important for us. You might play in a league where nobody kicks it deep, so we're not going to put a ton of time on our kickoff return, mainly a hands team. You may not have a kicker, so you may not even bother with extra point field goal. You may not have a good punter, so the easiest thing for you might be to do rugby kick from your offensive formation. There's
Yeah.
lots of ways you can, as Daniel mentioned at the introduction part, you could save time. Like if you don't have it, where are some ways? Well, let's not just do it to do it. Like let's go ahead and focus on the special teams we can be good at, pour some time in those, and then let's maybe not spend as much time if we're not going to be good. Let's just be good enough we're not taken advantage of. One last little tip I would give on this when we might get into these other questions is like we always train about 3 kids on how to block a kick on our whole program. So anytime we design a block, those are the 3 guys that are involved, and it saves us a ton of time. And we have a coach that works with those guys. And so there's a lot of things in special teams you got to kind of figure out of, who's coaching what are we going to focus on, who's going to play. And so as a coach, that head coach, I think, needs to make sure that whatever his theory is getting passed along. What you don't want to have is a disconnect where the head coach thinks one way on special teams and the special teams coordinator doesn't know that. And that could be we're going to be conservative and he wants to be aggressive, or the other way around. It just needs to kind of match philosophically.
Speaking on that point real quick, and I want to go back on some of your other topics too, but I mentioned Joe and we talked about Kevin Kelly, the never punts, the always go for twos. Those kind of systems, it's live and die by the sword. You're going to win some of those. I think it's very interesting that the NFL just changed kickoff, and the XFL or UFL or whichever version of it we're adopting just showed us a new a onside kick, the 4th and 15 play from your own 15 or 20 or whatever. Because you talk about if your defense already isn't good anyway and you're just leaking like a sieve and you're just going to let them burn clock, you might as well try it for a 4th and 15. You know what I mean? So at least you can get ahead that one possession. So there's some thought. But regardless of what your plans are, I think that it absolutely has to be a combination of the head coach, coordinators on both sides, and the special teams coordinator having conversations. Because as the DC, if the head coach and the OC constantly want to go for it on 4th down instead of just punting because maybe our punt isn't great, and I'm getting the personal attack because now my defense is constantly having to defend a short field. But there's going to be some problems, right? If that's not a conversation we've already had. The same with going for 2. As the OC, I mean, that's what I want to do. I want to leave my guys out there. I just want to go operate. But if you start losing games by 1, or wherever where an extra point could have tied it up, or at least taken the attempt, there's just a lot of conversations that need to be had between all the coordinators. Our next question here, you kind of touched on a little bit, so I really want to know how you do it. Do you ask if you give each coach a team or a role? So let's talk about your situation. As you said, you have a special teams coordinator, and then other coaches help.
Right.
How much control do they have over their team that they're helping with, or do they just go back and ask questions of him and it's his plan? Kind of how does that work?
I think, again, that just depends on how you've got it structured. When I've done it that way in the past, essentially I was the main guy on special teams, and those guys kind of would work with me on whatever needed to be done. And so I think if you're going to ask a coach to be involved in it, they need some direction, but they also need the ability to make some decisions, because that's why you ask them to do it. And so, like punt team, we might say, hey, get together. We don't really feel we have a good snapper, or we don't really feel we have this or that, or whatever it might be. And then decide, okay, this is the type of punt we're going to go with. and then this is how comfortable we feel. And then maybe the same thing on your kickoff team, extra point field goal team, whatever that might be. For me, a lot of times as a head coach during pregame, I'm kind of going out and getting with my coaches that work with those guys. So I know, hey, we get inside the 20, we feel pretty good. Hey, to kick a field goal, or hey, our punter, he's kind of been struggling, or we don't have a lot of faith in our long snapper, or we really don't have a lot of faith in our backup long snapper. So I think those are conversations that need to take place. But I think if you're going to allow a coach to be in charge of a team, they need to have some ownership there and some ability to make changes and make adjustments. The down part of that is the good part of that is those coaches have one team they're working with and they can be solid on it. The down part of that would be everyone has to be kind of involved on a Friday night. And some of those guys might have a big role or it may not match. So you got to be careful when you're choosing that of which coach has which team, because they may be trying to make sideline adjustments, and here comes the punt team. So you got to kind of be
Right.
aware of how that might go. And of course, the other way to do it is probably the more normal one, and that's basically you're going to give one guy to be in charge. I do think one thing we do a real bad disservice of with our coaches is we put them in charge, and then we don't really give them the authority and teach them how to use other coaches. Because a lot of times that special teams coach, that might be all he does. He might be the youngest guy on your staff. He's going to be kind of scared to ask other guys to help him. So you need to, hey, coach so-and-so's in charge. This is his 5, 10, whatever minute period here. So you're not going to be over there doing whatever stuff with your guys if he needs you to work. And so we usually will exempt certain people, like I'll say my line coaches can take all our linemen down there and work with them. But then every other coach is at his discretion. And then you need to encourage that guy to use those coaches. There's nothing I hate more than watching one coach on the field and 5 guys watching the one coach. And so
Yeah.
that guy's got to learn how to use it. Like if you're doing kickoff team, put one guy in charge of the right side, one guy in charge of the left side, one guy in charge of the kicker, and one guy's, making sure no one's off sides, whatever it might be, however you want to divide that out. But you need to use your coaches so that we're getting better at what we're doing in special teams.
I think a big part of these first couple of things we talked about here is numbers. We greatly understand that because I'm sure you've been at multiple levels of schools, and I definitely have. From the smallest 11 man to the 5th largest 11 man. Like I've been at schools everywhere in between. So we understand that maybe you just have 11 guys that can go, right? We talked about earlier, organizing, who do you pull off, who do you leave on? It might just be best 11 and let's ride, right? There may not be any option to replace a kid. And the same with coaching. It may be you as the head coach or the special teams coordinator, and it just kind of is what it is. Yet you want to pass those things off, but I kind of like what you said at the end. Make sure if you do, you're giving that person some authority and resources, right? Once again, if I hire a defensive coordinator, I kind of expect him to bring a system with him. Now I have stuff I can provide, but I'm just kind of one of those, like, I don't want to hire a guy to do a specific job and then tell him how to do it. That's just weird to me, right? And it just creates a weird relationship to where, if I hire an OC or a DC, they better bring something with them. I can give them something if they don't have it or I don't like it or whatever. But same thing on special teams. There's guys out there that don't come with a system.
Right.
If you're a coach right now and you're just an assistant, you should be building your system. It should just be pieces of what you've experienced, pieces of what you've been introduced to. But that goes for special teams too, right? If your current high school is a shield punting team, learn it, put it on paper, get you a quick cuts and jot it down. What's that, $200 a year or something for your own playbook making service, right? And you get to keep it with you, unlike Huddle that ditches your stuff every time you switch schools.
Or just use PowerPoint. Yeah.
Or just use PowerPoint. Absolutely. Canva, all educators are free on Canva. I love it way more than PowerPoint. I made my whole offense in there. So, but take notes and take that stuff with you. Offense, defense, your philosophy, all those things that, and that way when you do get that role, you can have a little bit of confidence and competence, and you earn that authority, and then you can go out and feel good about exercising. What is the imposter syndrome, right? Like where you just don't feel like you belong.
Right.
That's exactly what special teams coordinators are going through, but it shouldn't be. No one questions the OC when he says something. No one questions the DC. Why would you question the special teams coordinator? It's so weird to me that we treat that like the stepchild of coordinator positions. I understand you're not going to put your highest rank or your most experienced coach there because he's got a bigger role. But it's like your middle school or your JV head coach, right? You really should be putting people there that are going to build your program. Take care of the things downstream, or I guess upstream, right, of your varsity team. The same way here. So moving on to just kind of talking importance here, and as I just mentioned, making these things important. So how much time do you give for special teams in practice?
Well, we during spring football here, we will actually give a little bit of time to. We got to find specialty guys. So I think there's really three major parts of what you need to practice in special teams. I think one of them is the actual specialty, like where you're trying to find snappers, kickers, punters, holders, returners. Like those are specialty skills. So that's a portion of practice. It probably needs to happen every day. And a lot of times the easiest way to do that is right there at the beginning. And so we usually will budget about 5 minutes at the beginning of practice where our guys will go through and they'll work on, all of our guys that have any potential to be a returner, punter, kicker, whatever that might be. They're going to get some time really to start every practice. So that's 5 minutes that I don't really count as special teams, but it is definitely directly affecting that for sure. Then you have drills, like drills that I think help with every special teams, like open field tackling drills. Like we're going to do those with most of our back 8 players on defense, and a lot of our guys go or at least practice both ways. So I know that's not technically a special teams drill, but anytime you're working tackling from space or disengaging off of blocks or avoiding blocks, in my opinion, you're working very much a kickoff punt related skill. The same thing I think could be said for um, like blocking in space as a receiver or a running back. Those kind of guys you're going to get on kickoff return. And so the skill development that can be done inside of the special teams time, but a lot of times there's some natural overlay there. So to me, that's happening. And then you've got to work on the actual team, just like you would work on running plays or running your defensive alignment or whatever it might be. So the actual special team. I would say that it's not, I've heard this said a lot where it's football's 1/3 offense, 1/3 defense, and 1/3 special teams. And that's a lie. Like, no, because you run 70 plays of offense and 70 plays of defense and 20 plays of special teams. I'm not a genius, but that's not the same. And so,
Right.
we're not going to give special teams the same amount of time in practice as we are going to give our offense and defense. It doesn't mean we're going to neglect it, but then you have to get into some of the things you were talking about earlier, Daniel, of which special teams become priority one. What's priority 2, 3, and you kind of rank them going down. I've always been a big believer on anything that they can score against you, that's priority 1. So that's punt and kickoff. Like those are the two that you're either going to do it, you're going to do one of those two things after every drive. Unless you go for it and don't get it. You're either going to punt it or you're going to kick it off because you just scored a touchdown. So in my opinion, those two teams get the majority of our time. When I say that, that means basically they're going to get about 10 minutes a week of actually that team. So I'm not counting drill. I'm not counting specialty. That's different time. They're going to get a 5-minute on probably Monday. And they're going to get a 5-minute on either Tuesday, Wednesday in there. And then, of course, Thursday, we kind of do a quick walkthrough of our stuff. So they're going to get hit probably 3 times a week. Those two are. I think extra point field goal, if you have a kicker, needs to be rep. But let's be honest, other than the holder, snapper, kicker, how often do you need to work down blocking? Probably not very often. So we hit that once a week. If we have a fake, we might work it a little extra. But basically, we're going to work that once a week. Then we look at our opportunity type special teams. These are special teams where you're trying to create. That's going to be your kickoff return, and your blocking teams. Extra point field goal block, punt block. I already mentioned during our specialty period, we're working with our guys that are going to block kicks. So they're getting 5 minutes a day worth of blocking kicks from different angles, blocking punts, blocking extra points, blocking whatever that might be. So you really don't need to rep that team a ton. Those three guys need to get repped, but your blocks really you need to work whatever the scheme might be. So we can kind of limit that to now we're going to hit it on maybe Monday and walk through it again on Thursday on those two teams. And you may have a sellout block you need to kind of go through. Into the game, you have to block it. That kind of stuff we're going to go through. Then you have kickoff return, and really to me, that's a week-to-week adjustment. If they're going to kick it deep to our best player, we're going to work that quite a bit because that's a chance to make a big play. If you're watching the film and that kid kicks it as far left-footed as he does right-footed, then we're going to put a hands team out there and we're not going to waste a lot of time. Or you see a team that's kicking away, like teams that are smart enough to not kick it to your best players, then you're probably going to not spend as much time. Or if they always kick it sky kick to the right, we're going to put our best guy over there on the left and say, all right, kick it to him. So we're not going to spend a ton of time. But again, we are getting 5 minutes a day with our guys that really need this. Our returners are getting 5 minutes a day. Our kicker, snapper, holder, punter, 5 minutes a day. So they're getting the work they need. The actual special teams, we're very heavy on Monday. We go about 20 minutes of special teams. So that way we can get it all installed. And then Tuesday, we work two teams. Generally, those are the two important ones we think. That's going to be punt and kickoff. And then on Wednesday, we'll pick which of the other groupings is our most important, and we'll work those that week. And then Thursday is generally a walkthrough on a lot of the things we do. So that's how we do it. I'm not saying that's perfect, but it at least gives kind of an idea of why we do what we do.
I'll tell you, up until this last year, I felt like everyone was just kind of winging it with our special teams plan. This year it was really neat to see a state championship level program operated by a head coach who's got 6 rings, and he's out there showing us that special teams is important, right? He's got it scheduled every day. But something I really took from there and will put my toolbox moving forward is pre-practice meetings every day. Every single day you show up and your kids are meeting to have a motivational period. Then it goes into special teams. So if you're not on special teams, you go with your coach in your group, right, or your position, and you're doing pre-practice for whatever you're going to be working that day. So we've seen it on every single day. You've seen what you're going to go out and do on the field. You've already seen it on the board, or at least talked through the script, or whatever it is. Hey, this is the block we're really focusing on this week. And it doesn't matter if you're O-line, D-line, whatever. We're all having a pre-practice meeting before we ever step foot on the field. And what that does is it gives that special teams coordinator a chance to just keep all the kids in their seat before they disperse to their individual groups, talk through that plan. And then there's like a 10 to 15, maybe 20-minute get dressed period where we release the players from meetings, go get dressed, be on the field at a certain time. And we just shorten that for 10 minutes for all the special teams kids, right? So they're going to go out and work whatever the primary special teams that day is. They're going to go out and work it for 10 minutes while everyone else is still getting dressed. So where there's not anybody standing on the sidelines, you talked earlier about a bunch of people watching one guy work. Well, that's not going to be the case because they don't even have their groups down there yet. They're just down there to help with special teams. And I just thought that was a really neat way. And there were still special teams times built into the schedule, right? We'd come out and do our Indy. And while you're doing Indy, they might pull the punting group over. And then, we're going to go in and watch field goal before we get into Team O or whatever it is, into our group stuff. But I just thought that was really, really neat. And a plan that I kind of want to take and install at some point is just realistic special teams practice. So if you're in the middle of team offense, call punt sometimes, right? Or let it and score and then go down and kick a field goal. And then just kick 2 or 3 while you're there. You're already set up for it. You got the surprise of, holy crap, we're about to do this. Everybody get on the field. And that way when you get, we watched TCU, what was it, 2 years ago, make a run to the championship game. And one of the big, end of the season or maybe it was even a playoff game, I can't remember. but they got to win because their field goal team could get on the field in 13 seconds and kick a 40-yarder or whatever, right? I mean, that's how they even got to the big dance. So, it is very, very important, but I think it's also important to practice those kind of pressure situations. And maybe your position coaches don't even know it. Maybe you as the head coach, you're just like, punt it, let's go, see it right now, right? Maybe it's just a sloppy play, so it gives you an excuse. Hey, if you run like crap, we're going to have to punt. If you throw that bad ball, we're going to have to punt. Or maybe it's just something you just want to, just hit every once in a while. But I think it's really a way to, I guess, save time on your practice script because you're going to, on your schedule, right? Because you don't have to put in 10 minutes for punt team. No, just get you 3 kicks right there in the middle of your team offense. And you can't do kickoff and kickoff return that way. It just doesn't make sense. That needs to be aligned. But if you do those pre-practice conversations, those meetings, you don't have to worry about subbing guys in. That's something we ran into, right? You get there on Wednesday on special teams period. You do yours on Monday, and that kid's not at practice, or oh man, they're ineligible. Who are we putting there? You kind of get through that. Oh crap, it's that overlooked thing you go through sometimes. So and so tweaked their knee on Tuesday practice, so we forgot to go in and change everybody's roster. So there's just a lot going on to it, and that obviously can throw a wrench in any plan. But if you have those pre-practice meetings and talk through it, now you already know who you have available, who's injured, who's not, etc. So just a few ways I think would be a good way to work that into practice. And I guess I kind of started into our next question too. Do you work drills for these? And you kind of worked through a little bit of them as well. But I think that's the best way that I know to do it is those combining what Coach Blankenship taught me this past year with my own little devised scheme of just throwing it in there everywhere.
Yeah, we always try to end practice with some kind of situational deal where you're working offense or defense with the special teams kind of mixed in. And the last second field goal is a pretty common one, like you mentioned, which is like I think every well-coached high school team wasn't shocked that TCU could run out a field goal team and kick that. We worked that for 10 years now. I don't know if we'd make it, but we'd at least have 11 guys out there snapping and holding it, So
right.
I think that's a common thing, and that's a good point you're hitting. You need to be working these things. So for us, like on drills, I think there's certain drills that you want to. Again, we try to mix them in with our team, with our defense or offense or whatever it is. But there are certain things to think about. So, for instance, do your kids know that when you block a kick, you should never fall on it? Like maybe you've coached them that if you block a field goal or a punt and it goes backwards, that there's zero benefit to falling on the ball. So, that would lead me to think, well, let's work a scoop and score. Like that would be a fitting drill here to work if we're working blocks. Or do your kids know that, hey, if we do block it and it goes forward, we got to get away from it. So we're going to have to work that. It's a random drill, but like if you work the shank punt, everybody get off the field drill. That's kind of a team drill, but it's a drill you need to work. Or what about your kids understand if the ball rolls through the end zone, we would rather down it at the 1. So if you repped what that looks like, and those are only things you can really do by doing it as a team. Get everybody together and doing it as a team. And so there's also other drills you can work on, like your lane running and extra point or on kickoff or punt, where you've got to get in your lane and get going. So to me, a lot of times those drills can be done individually, but it almost makes more sense to do it almost as a group if you have coaches that are spread out and can give everybody individual attention. So we don't do just a ton of like special teams only drills, but we do try to harp on these kind of focal points, of what we want to make sure we're accomplishing, like open field blocking when a guy is going past you, the new helicopter block that everybody's kind of working. Are you working that kind of stuff so you don't get a holding call? Are you working onside kick recovery or pooch kick recovery, or how are you working that stuff? And it's just things you need to I think you need to think about instead of just lining up and going through stuff on air or lining up and killing your poor JV kids that are back there. Let's try to find drills that might apply inside of your teams. If you are a special teams guy, don't just work punt from like Daniel said, randomly mix it in. But randomly mix it in on different parts of the field. Like Does your punt look the same from your own 5 yard line as it does if you're going to have to punt from the 50? Have you worked that kind of stuff? Because if you haven't, when those moments start, or what about punt from the left hash? Have you worked that one? What about field goal from the left hash or the right hash or wherever that's going to be? Have you worked that kind of stuff? Because if you haven't done it, inevitably it's going to show up in a game. And you either have to hope that kid's really smart and just a great athlete, or that you have practiced that stuff so they kind of understand what's coming.
I think of a situation, and I don't know, to be honest, I don't know the ruling in high school. I remember watching an NFL game, and it was a kickoff that was rolling down the sideline but hadn't gone out, and the player established himself out of bounds and then grabbed the ball, right? He laid down and touched the ball. That way it was technically the ball had gone out of bounds because of
as high
ruling.
school, that's correct. You can do that.
And it's the same in high school?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Here's another one for you. If you guys are high school coaches, if you kick a field goal and miss it at the NFL, they place it at the spot of the hold. If you kick a field goal and miss it in college, it's the spot of the snap. If you kick a field goal and miss it in high school, it's where the ball rolls to. So technically, you could kick a 70-yard field goal that you miss, but it rolls down to the 1. They get the ball at the 1. And so very different rules in high school football, college football, and pro football. Do your kids know that kind of stuff? Like, do they know that you kick it, let's say, or your kid shanks it, but it's rolling around? That's just like a punt. And so those are things you got to work on.
And if you kick it and literally miss left or right, it's a touchback, right?
Correct. They get the ball at 20. Yep.
Yeah. So that I remember that being one that's come up in a game or two with our kids. Is like you kick it, you miss it, and you think, hey, we just gave it to them at the 3 or what? No, they get to back it all the way up to the 20. It's a touchback. So,
and then you also have like the free kick rule, which I think that showed up somewhere this year, where you get them pinned down deep, and they're having to punt out of their own end zone. You can fair catch it, and you can line up and whatever, and they can't rush you. You can kick that for a field goal. So there's a lot of those random rules. I don't like, for me.
I wish somebody put a book out.
Yeah, for me as a coach, like, I'm not saying you need to like just go work all these scenarios every day. Really, I don't know if you ever need to work that, but you need to have a guy on your staff who's aware of that and a returner who's aware of that. I think at times we go one or two ways with special teams. We make 10 kids sit there so that the one kid who really matters is getting coached up, and we spend too much time, or we don't coach them at all. And I think there's got to be some kind of, to me, we want to work that stuff during our specialty period, that 5-minute pre-practice where you're working with your returners. Hey, tell them that rule we just said. Hey, if they ever get backed up, if you fair catch it, we could kick from there. As long as that kid kind of knows, no one else really needs to know. And so it's one of those deals where coach up the ones that kind of matter.
Yeah, very good. All right, a little bit shorter this time. Our episodes have been all over the place, and I think that's good. Keeps variability in it. So let's go ahead and get to our what not to do as a coach segment here.
Yeah, so what not to do as coach on this one is you try to focus on everything instead of what's important, which kind of went right off of that last question. That worked out well. But a lot of times as coaches, we want to coach up every single detail and all these fine rules and all these important things. And there's nothing wrong with knowing that as a coach. There's nothing wrong with the certain kids that need to know, knowing that stuff. But at times, we sometimes lose the forest for the trees. We will spend a crazy amount of time chasing things that might never happen instead of trying to focus our time on what's going to help us win football games. Like, if we don't have a punt blocked and we block a punt, our odds of winning that game are like 80%. 80%, that's something we need to work on. Okay. If we can win the field position battle, like we can cover kicks and we can return kicks, then we've got a huge chance of winning the game because the field position battle matters. So those are the things we need to work on. We don't need to go chasing squirrels down different random roads. And then also you need to play to your strengths. Like, if you don't have a good kicker, like Daniel said, why spit into the wind? Like, why try all these field goals and extra points and just get really good at going for 2 and get really good at your 4th down offense? So if you don't have a really good punter, maybe we can just quick kick with our quarterback and they don't have a returner back. So now it will roll down there where we want it to go anyway. So, in my opinion, a lot of times as coaches, we need to look for ways that we can invest the least amount of time for the biggest return, especially when it comes to special teams. Because in special teams, if you're not the head coach, you have no idea. You're kind of being dictated to how much time you have. And if you are the head coach, you can't make them equal. It's not 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So what are you going to do in that 10 to 15 minutes a day that you have for special teams to make sure you're maximizing your return? So my advice would be focus on things that are going to help you win. Don't try to chase all these random situations.
Awesome. Sweet. One last chance here. We'll talk about our sponsors. Reach out to Mark and Ryan over Ace Sports. If you're looking for a video board, there's no better quality. Just jump. New book. You talked about is it 90 formations?
Yeah, 90 power shotgun formations.
Awesome. So 90 power shotgun formations. Social media. I am at Coach Chambo OK on Twitter/X. You can also reach out at Chamberlain Football Consulting at gmail.com. If you have any recommendations about an episode you want to hear, you want to come on and be a guest, whatever it is. I've gotten a lot of emails of all of those types. And so I love corresponding with other coaches. It just makes that's what we're here for, really. So, Kenny, where can we find you on social media?
All things FB Coach Simpson. So at FB Coach Simpson on Twitter, FB Coach Simpson at Gmail is my email address. FBCoachSimpson.com is where you can find all the materials we've kind of been talking about. Also, we have new headsets coming out, I think, in the next week or two. So be looking for that one. All those are free. You can find all those over at FBCoachSimpson.com also.
Awesome. The podcast is at Coaching 101 Pod on Twitter/X. We want to thank you for being a listener to the Coaching 101 podcast. We'll hope you'll join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you'll always know when new episodes are out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.